The joint marathon continues on the 1+1 channel. I'm Solomia Witkowska, and this is TSN. Corruption in Energoatom. Herman Halushchenko has been suspended from his duties as Minister of Justice, Prime Minister Sviridenko reported. The decision was made at an extraordinary government meeting this morning. Halushchenko, who previously headed the Ministry of Energy and still maintains influence over it, appears in recordings released by NABU as part of an investigation into large-scale corruption at the state company Energoatom. Halushchenko responded to his suspension from the post of Minister of Justice. He wrote that he agrees because suspension during the investigation is a civilized and proper course of action. However, he added that he will defend himself legally. The government has prematurely terminated the powers of the supervisory board of the company Energoatom, and this was announced by Prime Minister Yulia Sviridenko. Additionally, the Ministry of Economy, Environment and Agriculture must submit a new composition of the supervisory board for government approval within a week. The tasks of the new board are to quickly relaunch the management, conduct a full audit of the company, and provide comprehensive assistance to law enforcement agencies in investigating possible corruption cases. The Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office, SAP, has notified a former Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine of suspicion of illegal enrichment. The publication Ukrainska Pravda believes that this refers to Oleksiy Chernyshov, who held the position of Deputy Prime Minister until July 2021, while also heading the Ministry of National Unity. Detectives documented the transfer of more than $1,200,000 and nearly 100,000 euros in cash to the suspect and his trusted associate. This former official is suspected by NABU and SAP of abuse of office and receiving an unlawful benefit in an especially large amount. Detention with the possibility of bail set at 136 million hryvnias. Yesterday afternoon, the High Anti-Corruption Court began selecting preventive measures for the former advisor to the ex-Minister of Energy, Ihor Myroniuk, who appears in the NABU investigation under the alias Racket. According to the investigation, it was Myroniuk who was one of the organizers of the corruption scheme at Energoatom. He discussed the terms of cooperation with contractors. In particular, the criminal group that included Myroniuk received 10 to 15% from contracts, controlling personnel and financial decisions. Through the barrier mechanism, counterparties were forced to pay kickbacks in order to avoid payment blocks. And, according to the investigation, the group managed to launder over $100 million. In addition to Ihor Myroniuk, the corruption case also involves businessmen Timur Mindic, Mikhailo Zuckerman and Ihor Fursenko, Energoatom's executive director Dmitro Basov and others. 5 out of the 7 suspects have been detained. Preventive measures for them will continue to be decided today. Mindic and Zuckerman have left the country.
There are sufficient grounds to grant this motion. I ask that it be granted and that a preventive measure in the form of detention be applied to the suspect Myroniuk. If the motion is granted, Myroniuk must post bail in the amount of 136,620,000.
Our client has never been an official. He was neither an advisor nor the Minister of Energy, nor was he an advisor to the head of NNEGC Energoatom. That is, he had no official authority to influence anyone, including the Deputy Director of Energoatom, Basov, and the head of the Financial Department.
Today, electricity outage schedules will be in effect. Restrictions will last throughout the entire day in most regions. In particular, hourly power outage schedules will be implemented in 2 to 4 stages. The situation in the power system is very difficult, according to Ukrenergo. Strict restrictions for all consumers have been introduced for at least several weeks, and that's assuming Russian shelling stops. The State Energy Supervision says we have enough spare parts and components for restoration. Ukraine manufactures some of the transformers itself, while the rest are purchased from Europe. However, this does not completely solve the problem. Russia has captured 3 settlements in the Zaporizhzhia region, according to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi. And according to him, the situation has significantly worsened in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipole directions, where the enemy, taking advantage of its numerical superiority in forces and equipment, advanced during fierce fighting and captured 3 settlements. Therefore, our defenders had to withdraw from positions near 5 settlements in the Huliaipole direction, reported the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin. Ukrainian troops have completely withdrawn from Uspenivka and Novomykolaivka. Fierce battles are ongoing for Rivnopilya, Yablukove and several other settlements. The invaders are trying to cut off the logistical route that leads from Pokrovsk in the Dnipropetrovsk region. And in the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are already entering the city itself. Currently, according to our sources, there are more than 500 occupiers in Pokrovsk. And just in the past day, the enemy made 72 attempts to storm our military positions there. According to preliminary estimates, our soldiers have eliminated over 100 occupiers in this direction. Fierce fighting is also ongoing in the southern Slobozansky, Kupiansk, Kostiantynivka, Lyman, northern Slobozansky and Kursk sectors of the front. In total, there were 206 combat engagements over the past day. New support from Denmark. Copenhagen has announced a military aid package worth more than $210 million. This was reported by the Danish Ministry of Defense. And this is already the 28th military aid package from our allies in Denmark. Part of the funds will be directed toward additional financing for weapons production in Ukraine, and another portion will go to the Pearl Initiative, under which allies purchase American weapons for our country. Fuel will also be purchased with money from this aid package. Where will this take place? This will be carried out through the NATO Support and Procurement Agency. Ukraine is at the center of discussions at the G7. A summit of the chief diplomats from the 7 largest economies in the world is taking place in Canada. The head of Canada's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has already announced the meeting will begin with a conversation with Ukraine's chief diplomat, Energy Ihor, to reaffirm collective support for our country in the face of Russian aggression. Energy Ihor will take part in a series of meetings. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs states that the key topics of the negotiations and the ministers' speeches will be strengthening support for our country, overcoming Russian aggression and restoring peace, as well as increasing sanctions pressure on the aggressor state, fully utilizing Russia's frozen assets, bolstering Ukraine's energy resilience, and additional investments in the development of Ukraine's defense industrial complex. In the evening, the Russians once again launched a massive drone attack on Odessa. Local residents report a hit on a building. It had not yet been occupied, so there were no casualties. And the day before, the occupiers' drones fell in the regional center and Odessa district. A private house was damaged. In Reni, a man was injured because he didn't make it to the shelter in time. The enemy also targeted civilian infrastructure. Energy facilities, a Ukrzaliznytsia depot, and administrative buildings were damaged. The Russians are staging a safari on civilians in Zaporizhzhia. In the Polohi district, the occupiers attacked a civilian car. As a result of a drone strike, a 56-year-old man died at the scene. 4 people were wounded in Kherson region the day before. The Russians shelled Bilozerka and Komishani with artillery. 2 local residents were injured, and enemy drones hunted people in Kherson. A utility worker and an elderly man driving a car were wounded. There was a fatality in the Sinelnikova district of Dnipropetrovsk region. The enemy struck the Vasilkivska community with drones. A 47-year-old local resident sustained fatal injuries. Infrastructure was damaged. And in Pavlohrad, shelling caused fires and damaged private businesses. In the skies over the region, air defense forces destroyed 8 enemy drones. Mandatory evacuation has been announced for another village in Zaporizhzhia. This is Malokaterynivka, which is 18 kilometers from the regional center and only 8 kilometers from the front line. Families with children are being evacuated from the village as a priority and on a mandatory basis, according to the Kushuhum community. Over the past month, the number of FPV drone attacks there has increased tenfold. According to the police, despite the danger, about 150 people remain in the village. Law enforcement officers are urging them not to delay and to leave the area. In total, the forced evacuation of children is already being carried out in 3 communities in the region. A shocking disaster has occurred in southwest China. Part of a recently built bridge has collapsed. And this happened in Xinjiang province. The moment of the collapse was caught on video. You can see how the structure literally disappears in a giant cloud of dust. No one was injured in the accident. It became known that a day before the incident, the authorities had closed the bridge after receiving reports of cracks appearing on the nearby slopes and roads. And ultimately, it was the landslide that later caused the road surface to collapse as well. The construction of the bridge was only completed at the beginning of this year. What consequences the collapse may have for the company that built it is still unknown.